Welcome everyone to another after work talk here in our Linux open source YouTube studio. I wanted to put out a quick, in my humble opinion, probably you guessed it already from previous live streams, but I'm kinda depressed and burned out that the big commercial Linux companies that everyone praises so much, right, from previously Red Hat, IBM, SUSE, Ubuntu and who not, all the big developers, all the prominent names, they are working on the Xbox server for decades, employed by such companies, that they keep breaking the Linux desktop faster than the community can fix it. And I think that is a disgrace to the open source community, to the users and to other developers. It is simply disrespectful and, not to say disappointing, and destroying a whole industry and millions of hours, not to say dollars, but millions of hours invested of 10 if not 100,000 developers over the last decades, since 1991. You know this already, I test here vintage and retro stuff, but even the latest stuff is at times broken, right? We implemented DDR5, SPD, temperature reading and stuff, and other latest and greatest state-of-the-art thing, but of course we also keep some nice vintage and retro collection alive for MIP, Spark and so on. And basically everything I touch has some regression or bugs, right? Some don't even boot, some have a broken SCSI controller. Yes, over the 4 years we fixed everything we found. Heck, even from regular PC SCSI controllers, the logging was broken, right? Previous videos. Basically and that is not that I'm collecting specifically obscure vintage and retro stuff. No, the SCSI controller was a SCSI controller that I purchased first hand back in the day from my SCSI scanner and later high-end SCSI drives. The VGA cards are what I purchased first-hand along the years when I had built PCs. And again they are broken, right? Not even to mention, of course, the SGIO2 frame buffer was broken for over 10 years already. And the Sun TG6 and other Sun stuff. But case in point, I'm shocked that even the Mach 64, yes, that is 20-year-old vintage stuff, but even the Matrox Millennium, or even a newer, not Millennium, Millennium probably too, but MGA, relatively not that old stuff. And so posted this today because I had some SCSI stuff to test. I had a vintage system here in vintage, yeah, 24-year AMD K6, but doesn't matter. It would also happen if I would have had such a graphic card in a modern system. And these graphic cards are even some variants still sold on server boards, I believe. But the case in point is, you could argue, but René, these are truly vintage and retro things. Yes, that might be, but until recently, because my company was for a decade using Apple systems mainly for our finally making money and for our Mac software, I didn't even had other GPUs in stock, right? Because for a decade I didn't purchase a single GPU, only as part of Intel integrated graphics of a Mac Mini or Retina MacBook Pro and stuff, where even an NVIDIA GPU was in there. So even when I am an enthusiast, although yes, a decade on Apple stuff, but I was just not a gaming enthusiast, right? I had plenty of stuff, but the only PCIe GPUs I had were actually literally from the G5 and Mac Pro, actually, which I can't even use on normal PCs because they have a Mac BIOS unless I refresh them. So it might even very be well for testing, right? People who do not need a fancy system, maybe they build a server and stuff, right? And in general, also just enthusiasts, right? You see this other YouTubers, other vintage loving PC retrospective and lazy game reviewing YouTubers. They have fun playing with this stuff each day, right? There is not a point of it's old crap. Yeah, but I mean, first of all, it was fine stuff and it's simple stuff and it would still work for basic needs, right? Like if some student doesn't want to spend a new PC, they could get a €20 Core i5 from eBay and put in a €1 GPU set from eBay or from the basement. Anyway, my point is, all this stuff shouldn't be broken, right? To the defense, I also tested an S3 Verge. From the handful of cards I tested, all didn't work except, you will not believe, the S3 Verge deaccelerator actually started. So what's happening here, and that is the disgrace, the betrayal of the open source community from these major developers that are so praised in the news of inventing the latest and greatest stuff, yet breaking all the old stuff, right? And if you agree, okay, well, X11 was not the most amazing, it doesn't mean that they need intentionally break it, right? They intentionally, like if they would not have touched it, it would still work. But because despite working on Wayland, and that is the next big thing, yet still not 100% ready, like global hotkeys, like with Xorg might be old-fashioned technology, but with Xorg I had global hotkeys, this precious Sun X11 property keys here. I patched OBS, it is even upstream. Yes, I sent it upstream 4 or 5 years ago. In the beginning of my YouTube career, other people buy for €100 or even 200 some aftermarket add-on overpriced 5 or 10 button Steam button deck stuff. I use my free Sun Type 6 keyboard and just patched OBS to use 10 freaking zine selections for free. The sad thing is it doesn't, maybe it works with some GNOME Mutter protocol stuff, but with plain Sway, there's apparently not a global hotkey protocol yet, as far as I researched last time. But that's also the point, right? I don't want to like I'm doing Linux for 25 years. I don't want to Google all weekend to find out with which latest and greatest experimental protocols, heck and demons, I can get global hotkeys to work for security reasons, because the Linux viruses and malware could steal your global keys. It's like, yeah, all I wanted was OBS scene selection. Anyway, so my point is, recurring theme, merchandise down below, the only constant is change and regressions, right? Don't touch the shit that you don't want to use. Given that all of those major companies promote Wayland and Pipewire or Pulsewire, it's also audio, right? Previous video. For 20 years I was using Linux fine. Now, for the last 5 years, I use the latest and greatest technology, and stuff is more broken than ever, right? Even for 20 years I was joking, I don't have sound problems, I just use Alzar. Now I use Pulse Audio and Pipewire, and yes, every other day I have audio issues, not even to mention all the YouTube live streams about this. But it's not even about the audio, it's also these drivers, right? If they work on the next best thing, which 10 years later is still not ready fully, yes, it works somewhat, yes, I'm literally live streaming from Wayland, but even that does not fully work for me, right? If I would be honest with you, since 4 years my hotkeys do not work anymore. Say intentionally, I could, if I would be evil, I could even say they break it intentionally for whatever company agenda reasons. Given that this mostly helps Microsoft and Apple, I'm not sure how big mega corporations breaking the Linux desktop would help them with their Linux. I don't know. Maybe they want Xorg so broken that everyone switches to Wayland. I have no idea. But case in point is, despite they themselves call Xout abandonware and each moment on each forum and mailing list tell people not to use it anymore, they change it for no good reason except cleanups, the usual Linux kernel cleanups, breaking stuff. And that is why these cards don't work anymore, right? Even other people reported this, right? Initially I thought, because it probably first occurred when I tested a year probably ago, like I already knew about this, or maybe not a year, maybe 6 months. I believe that was a driver on my Ultra Spark 5, and naturally I assumed they had some Spark thing, right? So then I, only by pure chance, testing some random old stuff here, the usual prototyping and testing you do, I literally took the cheapest card out of my archive box, which happened to be an ATI one, and more caught signal 11 segmentation fault. And other people even reported that here, right? Already nearly soon a year ago, April of last year. And people even, and that is also instead of people familiar to this matter who are being paid to work on that full-time, unlike us and other contributors, they should know that, right? They are those people who work on the Xorg server and the drivers. They should exactly know which line of code for PCI resource allocation. Basically, they changed their APIs and stuff. Like, yes, maybe for better cleaning up X-Wayland and stuff, but doesn't mean that they need to break the old driver-dependent X stuff, DDX stuff, right? So they're coming there, make sure PCI registers bar is properly mapped in the DDX. Those old DDXs require direct access to the hardware in the Xorg server. Yeah, so thank you very much. Probably I only tested a handful, so probably that means many old vintage drivers are broken. Ironically, they still, like Alan Hurricane from previous Sun and others, still commit their small cleanups, but only like some shadow warning, some man page and table generation, right? Other people also reported this already, right? So this is not a totally new thing, so however old this one is. And the setting is maybe even as old as, I don't know, maybe 22 or who knows what. I believe that was already crashes the driver for maybe a longer time. So yeah, maybe as old as 2022. And nobody else fixes it, right? Like, I'm getting, like, why should I fix everyone's stupid regressions for cleanups sitting at AMD, Red Hat, SUSE, who knows where, Ubuntu, getting actually paid for that, breaking that in their day job, and leaving fixing all the drivers for the community years later. And as you see, I'm not the only one, right? So it's also some small hobby project and so on. It's nothing wrong with having old hardware running, right? MGA is differently broken, so that is probably here some mode setting. I probably changed mode setting. I actually have seen in some other driver, Verge driver, they actually moved mode setting around. That is XF86 video. I believe I checked S3 Verge earlier, maybe that one here. So you see they even touch sometimes old drivers, but only the bare minimum. Maybe I don't know if this is required, if this fixes a crash. I don't know. This was committed by, or signed off by Alan Coppersmith. Did I say Hurricane? Sorry, I meant Alan Coppersmith. Maybe something like that breaks the MGA driver. Maybe now I would need to debug through this stuff. And the sad thing of all of this is today, just to treat myself, I thought I'd get something new. I actually brought myself a new keyboard. Just some cheap one, right? Because people always like, I love your keyboard so much. And then I type on this old Sun keyboard, which is not even the best. I had to, every year I now had to clean up the membrane because either a hair or a dust crumb stuck under the membrane. And sometimes live even preventing, like sometimes the keyboard work. So I thought I'd try the slim keys. I got it a little bit off. Someone like I got like return, yeah. Not the super most amazing, but what the case in point is, why I even say this, probably make share, like, subscribe for dedicated review. This is Keychron K3 slim mechanical switches. I wanted to be fancy, wanted to try some mechanical slim switch stuff. Not the super most impressed, but that's not the point. It's a versatile debugging keyboard, compact and stuff. But anyway, the point is, for my German key stuff, I wanted to use the alt graph key here. Oops, sorry for, do I not have a, I didn't have the key seen yet. And so this is a little bit lame from the manufacturer, I have to say, that this is a German version, but they were too lazy, like cheap overseas company, not knowing what they're doing. They probably should leave this for professionals. Or did I not? I copied the wrong scene, professional. And so it looks that if you want to use the right alt key, due to this company being stupid, bear with me, where is even delete, remove, yes. I deleted, no, I deleted it wrong. Okay, whatever, doesn't matter. I need to remap this key apparently because this company is stupid, but what can you do? It's basically, I mean, I got it with some discount, right? It's a full price. I can't recommend it. Sometimes I buy stuff Amazon, like warehouse deals, like probably returned from other people. It was like new, so whatever, right? And so it could be better, but whatever. It's basically, it's for the discounted price, okay-ish. It's not perfect, but also too good to return. So I would want to use this key here, alt graph. I would need to this is generating write control because this company cannot program, whatever, and doesn't have program. Yeah, this firmware should also be open source. Right? Like if you cannot do firmware, open source the firmware so professionals can modify the firmware. So case in point with Wayland, what I want to say is, long story short, I need in Wayland to remap remap the write control to alt graph to ISO level shift. And turns out this is also not easily available. I need to edit here my, sorry. It's a new installation. I didn't have the scene sets up that I previously had set up. So case in point, I couldn't even instantly find that there would be like sway or whatnot. Even that is a mess, right? Like for 20 years we had working keyboards, and then they come with their Wayland nonsense, and 10 years later you neither have global hotkeys, except maybe in some GNOME thing, and you can't even easily remap keys, right? Yes, there are some hacks. I found some hacks, but the point is I'm not interested in hacks, right? I'm interested in that stuff works and yet then you configure it. It looks to me that, so that is a keyboard now that we finally on the fly. So because the future is now, and Wayland is so super amazing, I now had to edit my system level file. So the easiest thing, so other people's like, yeah, there is this daemon, is this like basically other people, yeah, needs to be improved and stuff. And then basically followed some other Gentoo developers like, you know what, I just edited some system file. It's like due in 2024 because Xorg is obsolete and Wayland is 10 years later still not ready, and every Wayland compositor now rolls its own stuff, except using libxcb keyboard config and stuff. I now edited the bloody write control thing, so ISO level 3 shift, because it's no name keycron, apparently no name. Anyway, this is of course a bug in the CPU, a misadvertised feature, but the point is 2024, the year of the Linux desktop, and I, at least with Sway, don't have global key bindings for like OBS scene selection for security reasons, nor can I in my config apparently, I mean, unless there is a latest new feature and I didn't, like Google AI doesn't find it and stuff. So my point is, everything would be working, right, if those major developers, the most prominent and most known, best in the industry, would not constantly rename stuff. And what do we talk here? We talk about, we do not talk about major breaking changes, right? You see they even touch a little bit of, I mean, this is even a real, like 2 years ago, but not released, right? Like 5 years ago release, but hey, it's at least working. But I mean, there is a small fix 2 years ago, but yeah, really. I mean, appreciate Alan Coppersmith's work here. Better than nothing. But otherwise, we talk about renaming functions. Why are we still renaming functions in Xorg the last decade? Why do we still remove API parameters? Because they were never used, breaking drivers, or they were usually not used except in some and stuff. And that is a sad state, right? This is why I make these videos here, the shout outs. Of course, previously I could tell this my friends in the club or anecdotes at ISO meetings of C++ language or PDF standardization fame, and tell this to other Google and Adobe engineers in a bar over whiskey. But now I use this medium to broadcast here my humble opinion. And the sad thing is, a lot of things were reverse engineered, right? So this is sweat, blood and tears of 10,000 of people who in the 90s, in the 2000s, when there was, especially for video cards, the hardest to reverse engineer, because for storage the companies usually were a little bit more open and provided either drivers or more specifications, but GPUs was always, I can't give you specification, top secret, intellectual property and stuff, right? So that things that were the hardest to reverse engineer, the hardest to program, because that is your basic input-output thing, right? A storage thing, you can YOLO around there and either transmit some data or not or whatnot. But if your primary video output doesn't work, it's of course one of the most annoying things. Plus a lot of things, if you program this wrong in the past 20 years ago, the cards often fully locked up the PCI bus for further transactions. So oftentimes when those cards were stuck and crashed or the FIFO full or whatnot, and there were additional writes on the PCI bus, it oftentimes, at least in my opinion or my recollection, it often locked up the whole machine. So instead of standing on the shoulders of giants on 30 years since the Linux kernel, and similar long time since Xorg. If we would not constantly change and break everything, we would have had all drivers working, right? But because we need to reinvent everything, instead of, yes, Xorg was not ideal, maybe the better upgrade path would also be some Xorg 12 of more compatibility and less breaking compatibility, but whatever. Even if you say Wayland is the best invention since sliced bread, it doesn't mean that all of Xorg needs to be broken, right? And that is the experience that normal users have. And especially enthusiasts, of course, they do not necessarily use an S3 Verge or Mach 64 unless they run Ultra 5 or Ultra 30 or whatnot, or an SGIO2, which, spoiler alert, was also broken. But for example, 10 years ago, it would be more reasonable if someone is new to Linux to use a second system with such an older card, right? Nowadays, it's of course 10 years more old, but then they break everything and the Novo driver is still not fully working with the highest performance, right? Like nowadays, people would use an older second-hand or last-gen gaming rig NVIDIA card. And even that because they focus and spend all the energy on re-implementing everything and breaking half of the rest. Those cards that actually most newcomers for Linux have do not fully, perfectly, and with 3D acceleration and dynamic frequency scaling to their fullest boost frequencies also don't work fully, right? So we have the worst of both worlds, right? Neither the old vintage backup hardware is not broken, is not working, is broken, and the new hardware is often also not fully working, except of course AMD and Intel GPUs and some other embedded things, like now in the meantime Imagination or Ashai Linux of some amazing people, like the Ashai Linux team, of course, doing their also reverse engineering. But it would not need to be like that, right? If people would take a little bit more dedication and attention to details and not changing everything for the sake of change for tiniest API cleanups 20, 30 years later for stuff that's obsolete and nobody should use anymore. Why? I have to ask why. It makes no sense. You can't explain this to anyone with common sense. It is ridiculous. It is outraging. It is a disgrace, a disservice to the open source community. And especially last but not least because not only, as I said, it was reverse engineered, but these older cards are so simple. I wrote proof of concept 3D for S3 Verge because I wanted to see how difficult is it really 4 years on YouTube running on DOS, right? S3 Verge and Voodoo. And ironically, there was, most people don't know, but actually there was 3D support for Voodoo, right? If those big VIPs, these big VIP developers would not have broken everything, we would even have Voodoo graphic acceleration, right? Would that not be cool for some vintage gaming session to remember the past or have some weekend fun to use it? But no, it's gone. Although the hardware is so simple that I could implement texturing on a weekend. And these drivers are so simple. Sure, it's fixed function, it is first generation, it is nowadays barely accelerating, if at all. But you could have vintage fun, right? Why, like other people do with DOS and Windows, there simply is no such thing with Linux because everything is broken, right? And that is a shame. That is sad. That is, for me, heartbreaking because I grew up in these times. I grew up with the first Linux versions not having isolated graphics. I grew up reverse engineering graphic stuff. I grew up constantly fixing Endian issues of Xorg driver being there but having broken cursor or having broken acceleration on PowerPC and Big Endian. I fixed a lot of things. PCI domain support for Spark, right? ATI driver working on PC but not on Ultra Spark 5 because it has PCI domains. And so on and so forth, right? Everything what made possible and then broken again. And my impression was the open source community set out to support what they want and better than the vendor. And unfortunately, 30 years later, that is not really the case. Some things work. AMD GPU, of course, one of the best. But even then, I buy the Steam Deck. I mean, not only it has the worst audio driver implementation in previous videos, right? 2 mono decks that barely work in Alza and Pulse Audio. But then due to USB-C, I mean, I'm thankful for the AMD GPU, AMD developers that this works at all. But then you have this new stuff. People tell me, I don't use this vintage and retro stuff. Yeah, I brought the #1 flagship Linux device, and every other day as seen in live on this channel, the AMD GPU crashes with a multi-stream technology over the one USB thing, right? And I only run 2 displays. I'm not even running, and this is actually my second display, is a 4K display. Do I run old crap? No, that is a Dell Ultrasharp 4K display. I'm only running it at 1080p to minimize bandwidth, and I don't use it as 4K anyway, right? So I'm not even using it as the fullest potential for a little bit more bandwidth and stability. And even then, AMD GPU crashes every day and cannot, like, literally not even with suspend and resume or other stuff, like, no, in the middle of a YouTube live stream, like, no, and you have seen it before, graphic flicks out, resets, and usually it resets and recovers, but then I need to, like, then I can't suspend again because then it crashes completely. So once the AMD GPU resets for whatever multi-stream technology, USB, aux mode, modern stuff reasons, that is too complex for me to debug because I don't have all the protocol specs and logic analyzer and digital scope and whatnot. I use the latest greatest, and that is so complex that it also doesn't work reliably, right? Sure, when it works, it's nice, but somehow recently, sometimes I even have to reboot twice in the morning, right? Because sometimes when I boot the first time now, my displays do not come on because it's only constant change and regressions, and even it was working more reliably last year, but this year, recently, you would think they finally fixed the AMD GPU resetting in the middle of a live stream, but no, they make it even worse, and now sometimes on boot, my displays do not come on with Steam Deck, AMD GPU, latest and greatest. The future is now USB-C and so on. And that I really will not debug, right? And that's also the thing, this vintage and retro stuff, I, as a single developer and here live on YouTube, I can on a weekend write fixed function, OpenGL, or similar such stuff texturing. This AMD GPU, of course, that is a year, if not a multi-year project to re-implement for an alternative microkernel or BSD or whatnot, without the context of Mesa and DRM, because there's simply so much technology from all the display protocols to 3D and shaders and stuff to instruction set architecture that God forbid, if that is obsoleted in 10 years, that you really as a single developer will not get working again, right? This stuff I probably can fix in 30 minutes or an hour if I'm unlucky longer. Like if I'm unlucky and it's as convoluted garbage as the Unicode stuff, then it might take 8 hours. But usually, I mean, this I can probably fix in 30 minutes, maximum an hour. And in my opinion, instead of replying here, it's like, yeah, PCI register bar properly mapping the DDX. In my opinion, those developers who work on this Xorg server full-time at Red Hat, at IBM, at SUSE, at Ubuntu, really in 2 years' time could have fixed that already. And that is the sad end of the story. Anyway, I mean, not to mention of keyboard remapping, right? And that is not even, I mean, yes, that is really lazy from this company, but other people remap the keyboards for fun and for profit, right? So it's not like other people remap their stuff just because they wanted remapped for whatever macro reasons. So yeah, let's see what we have there in the comments and then call it a day. I'm just simply disappointed, right? And this is also why I wonder, why did I contribute for 25 years in this industry, in this open source industry and community, when other people just break it, right? They have no respect for other people's work. It's not other people would proudly stand on the shoulders of giants, but they just delete, change, delete, and break everything because they don't test, obviously not vintage hardware. And even if people report it, the bare minimum for those people who work full-time, if Xorg would be my project, I would know the stuff inside and out and would probably be able to fix such small, I would know what API I broke and like last month or last year, and I would precisely know like, that is that API. But I or they, here's this user here, he even writes, I'm an enthusiast Gentoo user but can't do C. We are an enthusiast T2 user and can do C. But I would also need to search and scroll through their changes and API documentations or look on other drivers or otherwise guru meditate and cross-reference that what broke there. And that is why for them it probably is 5 or 10 minutes, and for me it's 30 or 60 minutes if I'm lucky, and even longer if I'm unlucky, right? So in my opinion, not really satisfying. I hope you enjoyed to learn something. Damian also says, want their old stuff to work. Yeah, even P3, right? We have lots of P3 fans, we have SGI fans, we have Itanium fans, and I mean, sure, at the end of the day, everyone ends up at T2 for their vintage and retro needs for successful living. But yeah. Georg says, wasn't it like you could compile to many platforms old next, where that's now broken into... Sounds like new kernel without corporate involvement is needed. Yeah, exactly. New hardware is cool, but playing old one, so much fun for so many reasons. Yeah, even testing, right? Like if I buy when I prototyped here some massive storage array thing with a couple of SAS controllers recently, of course I plugged in there some random PCI card. Do you think I buy I don't have a spare. I don't even, I mean, ironically, since the YouTube live stream, I even, for YouTubing, I brought 3 PCIe cards, a cheap one like RX 580 for 99 euro 4 years ago, then a workstation WX 3100 in the pandemic for also cheap for like 50 on eBay, and then the overkill RX 6700 XT or so, but they are in systems, right? If I have a job, I have a consulting job, virtualization, storage, whatnot, or all the other things, I do not rip some PCIe GPU out of some other test rig or main workstation. I go to the leftover pile and plug in there some random PCI card. Like, I need a console, not a 3D gaming rig, right? But, I mean, other people might have 20 of PCIe cards. I don't have, but whatever. Wait for the new Copilot hotkey, also stupid. Yeah, you probably want to remap that to the open source area, right? Maybe Pipewire asks if it's okay OBS to use keyboard one day. Maybe Pipewire asks if you... Maybe Pipewire asks with text-to-speech or what. And welcome everyone. Never attribute malice, which adequate explanation by stupidity or ignorance. Yeah, I mean, I said if I would be evil, I would say, right? I mean, it's probably just ignorance and incompetence, but it's broken by the most qualified open source Xorg and Wayland programmers. And again, if this would be my project, I would not constantly break this shit, but somehow they do. Well, we replaced Ubuntu with Debian on Infra, and now we are pushing for replacing this on next work device in the pilot use reporting stability, unlike things freeze on Ubuntu. Happy to hear that. Wish they made some low profile clicky with trackpoint. Yeah, I'm not the... with this keyboard, I need to make a dedicated review. It's, yeah, I don't know, somehow... Yeah, leave its comments below. I don't want to spoil you the full review. I just wanted to test something else in my... Also, it's probably... I only have 2 Sun keyboards left because one I gave away. You remember the 4 years ago, the huge Unix RISC station giveaway, and I think I previously had 3 keyboards and I gave 1 away with that. So yeah, I only have 2. Probably should also not. Like, basically I need them for the next decade for my vintage and retro fun on Unix, so Spark workstations. I probably should not totally rock down. Probably overused it here the last 3 or 4 years. It's probably not the wisest thing to rock down a Sun keyboard. Recreate X1 tablet keyboard with a trackpoint and trackpad. Yeah, there is some Lenovo USB keyboard thingy, right? But probably that doesn't satisfy. It's probably too low quality. Though it might just buy that one USB device that lets you do remapping at the protocol level. I would rather, I mean, that sounds pretty glitchy, and hardware, requiring hardware, you could also hack something in the Linux kernel, right? It wouldn't cost you a thing, like if you only use Linux, but eventually there probably will be, I mean, there are some Wayland event server things, but I didn't want really to try out no multiple Wayland event plugging server things. I just wanted my alt graph key to work. Garfield's René's life story, fixing upstream deprecations. Yeah, exactly. But now we soon start a microcode. It's one of the biggest problems getting into open source. Contribute maintainers so often don't care about corner cases and pull requests stay open for issues. Die in the backlog. Yeah, like I submitted 3 years ago fixing GCC for G5 and cell, right? Because it miscompiles glibc with power 8 optimizations instead of power 3 or 4, what probably for power 4. I fixed that I noticed that in T2, right? When that broke 3 years ago, GCC, glibc broke on PowerPC. So like I'm not joking when I'm saying every week I debug here some major regression, right? The other day it was Crusoe. I tested today Transmeter though. The other day it was Centaur holes, right? Today I tested actually Transmeter that actually still works, but I tested something else unrelated to that, but latest kernel still works on Transmeter efficient. Happy to report that. But yeah, one of the biggest problems getting out that libread how Microsoft used to test Windows NT, big build and test lab that downloads daily builds through test automated scripts, emails, results of testing, open source, maybe only for like Red Hat, care about paying customers running the latest and greatest. Yeah, it is. Yeah, and that's the sad thing. It could everything work, and so they break it intentionally, right? With, of course, in the name of refactoring and cleanups, it, in my opinion, makes no sense, especially for, and that is why I can't understand it, right? It kind of makes no sense, except maybe removing some PCIe bar things for Xvalent, but then they forked Xvalent anyway, right? So what is the point of breaking Xorg proper when you anyway forked Xvalent for separate maintenance? Anyway, long story short, I said what I wanted to say. I find it depressively sad. Leave in the comments below how you find that. And I don't know how this... The thing is, when this continues like this, they will always break sort of 10-year-old stuff, right? I mean, they probably already started to remove some... Did they not already start to remove some old NVIDIA stuff from... Did they not delete some NV3 or 4 or whatnot? Of course, I mean, in Mesa anyway, right? They probably deleted all fixed function stuff recently, or nearly all. And that is why, like, if we always deprecate and delete what we just got, like 10 years later, we finally get it working, and then it gets deprecated and broken and deleted. It's like, what is the point? And like this, we will never have the year of Linux desktop. Like this, we sooner have a metaverse or an Apple Vision Pro meta reality and no open source anymore, or anyway straight AI, and totally skip the Linux desktop, because like this I don't see the Linux desktop when even for me stuff barely works, and I'm an expert fixing my shit each day, and still I don't have global hotkeys or every other day some audio issue. So maybe go fix some stuff. Hope you enjoyed this. Leave in the comments below how stupid my point of view is and how amazing yours is. Have a good day and night, and I hope to see you soon for the next fun stuff, like fixes to come.